Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we're continuing on with the Egress Black Edition build, and can't be too much further to go now. We've got, I think we got up to the front bumper and stabiliser bar. So let's bring in for a close-up look and crack on with build. So first thing we're going to do on this one is get the stabiliser bar brackets on. And to best I can tell it instructions, it looks like this should go on in that kind of orientation. So once we've got that in, we're then going to need to get it attached to the front bumper. So you want your stabiliser bar down at bottom, and then you want these two little brackets on, and we're going to have to put 4 screws in. So basically we want a sway bar in, we want these in with the slopes facing towards it, and then the 3 screws and your sway bar towards the bottom. So I'll get all these tightened up and we'll carry on. So we're going to need the carbon tower, and just looking at how this lines up, not sure what them holes are for yet, but basically you want that in that position. Then we've got 2 of these screws that come through, and these are your sort of machine thread and countersunk heads. Then we've got a nut on the back of each one of these. Quickly just nip these up. I'm still quite amazed with the quality of parts on this car. There is some gorgeous looking bits. So we're going to need a little nut in the top of there. Then we've got to flip it over. Then we're going to drop our stabiliser bar on, and make sure you get these 2 through it. Then we're going to want as longest bolt straight through. I'm just going to tighten that up so it grabs, and then the 2 short ones go in front. And if you're wondering why I keep dropping stuff and my fingers aren't working, if you follow me on any of the social media accounts, you'll know I've been out on mountain bike this morning and it was -5. So I'm slowly getting the feeling back in my fingers. But that is the sway bar fitted and his front tower. So let's see what else we've got. Right, so first thing we're going to want to do is build 2 of these up. And these, they just go level, and we're building these to 15.5mm. So we'll get the tie bars built up. Right, so that's as tie bars, 15.5mm on each one of them. And if you're building them up, if you take them down to about 3mm threads, they'll be somewhere close. So next we've got some oil in as bearings. So I'm just going to pop these in here, and we build these with the little insert sides facing up, so the smooth side faces down. Then we're going to need this, and for some reason it tells us to put a nut on here. So if we just tighten that up, and then you want the little ball joint on top. So once you've got that assembled, we can drop a few more bearings in. So that's as tie bars and the steering setup. Then we're moving on to this part. So for this, we're then going to get these little sort of ball joints. Now the weird thing is on mine, so we've got the countersunk holes that way, and these are going in from the bottom. But for some reason it says use lock nuts, but they've not given me any lock nuts. They've given me, I've got 2 spare washers that it's not saying we use anyway, and 2 normal nuts. So I'm going to put thread lock on these, and hopefully these normal nuts that it's given us will screw down nicely. Maybe this is just something they've changed on this re-release one. I'm not sure if there were ever any issue with clearance on the original, or if a washer and one of these nuts weighs about the same, because I know Tamiya do the parts by weight, also, so I've read. So I'm not entirely sure if this is a purposeful change or if it's just what they had kicking about, so that's what went in my kit. But to be honest, these with a bit of thread lock are going to do the job equally as good as locking nuts. They're just a bit smaller, so they definitely have more clearance than the big lock nuts, but that's what we're going with. Then we're going to get a steering parts. It's telling us to fit the spacers with the sort of nut shape on the bottom of them into here, and then on top of them we're going to have one of these little spring washers. Then we've got to drop one of these tapered screws through, and it's not telling us to use thread lock on here. So let's see if we can get that kind of started. Should be able to screw these on nice and free with zero play. And I know I keep saying it, but the tolerances and the lack of slop in this kit, I mean, I kind of took it for granted that all the Tamiya kits have got quite a bit of slop in them, but certainly not the case on this one. The tolerances and everything on this kit are absolutely bang on, and my fingers are still dead from earlier. But yeah, there's no slop in that at all for steering. So once we've got all that assembled, we're now going to have to bring the actual kit back in, and let's see where this is going to go. So looks like we've got these two round bottom spacers that now go into here, and then it looks like we'll line that up on top of the two remaining holes in the chassis. Then we need to get these two longer screws in place and tighten these down, and that is some fantastically smooth steering. So now we want these, and it's showing you to fit them with the adjuster nuts towards the inside. And there's not a lot of room to get your fingers in, but they do pop on. See if my pliers will open up enough to get on that. Yeah, that's easier. So we've got incredibly nice feeling steering, and it does look like these are to limit your steering, but we're starting to look a bit like a buggy. So let's crack on and see what else we've got. Right, so we're moving on to the rear dampers. Make sure you cut any little burrs off these. So let's see what we've got. First, we're going to need one of these horrible little E-clips. Then we're going to need to put one of his dampers on. Then another E-clip on the top. So once we've got that on, we can then get one of his shock bodies, and we can drop that in. And these, if you've never seen any, they're amazing quality. But we're going to need our shock guide on the bottom. Then you're going to need a tiny little bit of shock oil. Put it on your O-ring. And just be very careful when you put that on. And you won't do any damage at all. Put in a little bit more shock oil around here. Then once you've got that in place, you want this bottom part to close it up. And then with the actual kit, let's see which side it is. I think it's the 8mm then, looking at this. So you can crimp the bottom of your shock up. That'll feel nice and smooth. And then to finish off, we just need to screw one of the shock bottoms on. And then this is always a lot easier if you got some shock pliers, because then you won't mark your shock shaft. So that's one of the rears built. I'll get the second one put together and see what else we've got. So that's both shocks assembled. Don't over tighten this bottom nut, else you'll start to crimp the shock shaft and you'll feel it having way too much resistance. It should move really freely. So let's see what else we need. So moving on to the front shocks, we've got the shorter of the drive shafts, and then we've got a little E-clip. Get that in place. It's again telling us to use the 3-hole dampers, and then we're just going to pop another little E-clip on top. So once we've got that, we're going to drop it through again the much shorter front shocks. Then you're going to want one of these little guides sat on here. And it does tell you to fit these with the little ring facing down. So then we want a bit of a shock oil on his O-ring, and then we're going to close the shock up. And again, as you're tightening this, just keep checking your shock shaft. You don't want to tighten it up to the point. It's just meant to be squashing the seal, so you feel it running nice and free. You don't need to tighten it down too far. And then at this stage, it's just telling us to finish it off with the end of the shock. And I'm just tightening these down to the end at threads. So I'll get the second one built up and see what else we've got. So we're going to need a shock caps. Then you're going to want to get something to stand your shockers in. And we're basically going to fill these up till it's almost at the top. And then if you slowly move the shock up and down, you should get any trapped air working its way to the surface, and you can just top them back up. So I'll get all 4 of these filled, and then you just want to let them stand to get the air out. Right, so we're going to get one at rear shocks. We're going to get a shock cap, and then it says we need to push the actual damper in until we get down to 7mm. So we've got a 7mm, and then you just start getting a little bit of shock oil coming out at this point. So then you want to carefully get one of your shock caps, just push it on and start screwing it down. And there is a little tiny slot cut down the threads, so it will let any excess oil out. And at this point you do want to see a slight bit of oil come out your shocks, because then you know you're not getting any air trapped in them, and you should have a nice smooth performing shock. So I'll get the other rear one done. Now with the front shocks, the only thing that's slightly different is we're not trying for 7mm on these. On these ones we're going to drop it down to 5mm. And again, when you put the shock cap on, you're just looking for a tiny bit of oil to be coming out your shock, and then you know you're not trapping air inside it. And we should have a right nice, really nice feeling front shock as well. So I'll get the last one built. So first off, I'm going to make the rear ones up. The one thing to look out for on these, you've got R and F. The front ones are slightly thinner. So basically we're going to get our shock, then we've got the little adjuster that goes on. You've got one side that's slightly raised, so then we want one of these tiny little silver screws. I think these are BD6. So we're going to put this in, and then it does give you a starting position to measure these down from, and I believe it's 3mm on the rear down from the shock cap. It looks like the measuring. So let's get that into position. Then once we got that into place, we got these really nice coloured springs, and you should be able to slide that up and over and then drop it on, and you've got one of your shocks built. So I'll build the next one and start at 3mm, same as that. So that's his two rear ones built up. Now it tells you to build them both the same way round, but if you've seen any of my other builds, I like to build one of these collars one way and one the other, just so it's easy to get to on back at RC and say it both looks the same. But let's crack on with front. So with the front ones, pretty much the same thing, but it is telling us to go for 5mm on these. So let's get this into position and get his little screw in. And then we're looking for 5mm on this one. And it's not massively important for you to get these absolutely bang on, because you can adjust it once it's on RC. It's just an easy starting point. And then we just pop the bottom of the shock on. So I'll build the other one up and see what else we need. So there we have it. Front and rear shocks built up. Front ones with 5mm of preload on them, and the rear with 3mm. And they do feel really nice, and they do look really nice. I was slightly concerned because I had a car a long time ago where it had this style of adjusting the shocks, but they were really loose no matter what you do. But I can't conceivably see these moving at all. Once they nipped up, they are really solid. They're on there. So let's see what else we've got in store. Right, so first thing I'm going to put together is this for the rear wing. So we want it that way round, then we want that part on there, we want that part on the top, and I'm going to set this roughly halfway. And then for some reason they didn't include the washer that goes on bottom rear, but luckily I've got one out of one of the must have been one of the Tamiya kits, because it's exactly the same size washer. So let's get this tightened up. So that's basically how that goes together. We've got the shocks that need putting together, and these, you've got a big opening at one side, so these go with the olive into the bigger side. Then it looks like we have one of these screws, then we have a rubber O-ring, Then we have this washer with the insert towards the rubber O-ring. Then we have a spacer. So we'll get that done for both of the rear shocks. Then we need to grab our RC. We're going to need that, and it looks like it's asking us to put it in the top position, but it's not asking for any thread lock. Then you're going to want to line it up with the hole straight up. Then we should be able to clip the shock on at the bottom. Then we're going to go for the same on this side, so we can get a shocker on. If we get that lined up and just push it on, then we're going to have to place this through, and you can adjust the height that you want this at. Doesn't give any suggestions, but we've got two tiny little grub screws. So these want to go in from the rear. So I'm just going to kind of split it off and off and just nip that up. And we get the other one in. So we now should have really smooth, fully working rear suspension. And we've got our rear wing stay on. So let's have a look what else we need. So on with the front ones. We're going to need as little olive. We're going to have the bigger opening towards it. Then we're going to want a little O-ring. We're then going to want to work the top hat into it, and then a spacer. So then we should be able to get as RC back in shot. Then let's have a look. So these want to go in through the top of the shock mount, and then we're going to want a little nut on the back of each one of these. So we get them in place, and we can just nip these up. So once we've done that, then we should be able to pop the bottom of the shocks on. And what I've found is you're better off doing it with this little tool over the top of it, because then it stops you pushing the ball joint on too far. And they don't push off the back, because I did have that with the rear one when I tried to push it on. But we should now have fully working front suspension and rear suspension. So let's see what else we've got. So we're going to be running one of the 9i mod servos, BLS HV25MG, really quick servo and 25 kilograms of torque. We're running the FGR4B receiver. I'm going to be using the HOBBYWING 1080 ESC, and basically the Flysky Noble MB4 is going to be the radio for this one. So I'll select a new channel, then I'll name it. Then we'll set as channel definition to 4-channel, and we're going to drop into the RX menu. We're going to tell it to bind. So let's turn the receiver on with the bind button down, and it's going to bind as enhanced.
Binding successful.
And these are really quick but really quiet servos. So once we've got that centered, we can power off.
Signal lost.
And we get all this unplugged.
Signal lost. Shutting down.
Our power transmitter off. And just for setup, I'd got a 3S battery kicking about, but I'm going to be swapping the power connector on this, and it will be running 2S on this RC. So we just need the servo centered. So next thing we're going to need to do is build the steering bar up, and basically it's telling us we need to put these on and get this down to 71mm. So I'll get these screwed in. Once we've got that, we're going to get a servo, you're going to place one of these behind it, and we're going to get one of these screws with the big washer type heads. And I am doing this slightly different to instructions because it tells you to put the ball joint on the servo at this point, but I'm not sure if this servo saver is going to work for us or line up exactly where we need it to. So we'll get them into position. Then we're going to need the RC, and we're going to put that on. Now looking at this, I think we're going to need a longer servo arm. So let's see if we've got one that's a bit bigger than this. So I'm going to try with this really nice looking Wtf Rc one. I'm not really bothered about having a servo saver on it or not. So it looks like it'll fit. Let's just get the ball joint tightened up. So we've got that nipped up. Now we're going to have to get this in place, and you want your tapered screw first. So if we get that through, then we should be able to line one of our servo posts up. And we get the second hole lined up in the slotted one. So once we've got that lined up, and we know a servo's pretty much central there, that doesn't look like it's going to be far off. They are tight. So let's see if we can just clip this one on. So it does look like at full lock it's going to be very close to the drive shaft. So I'm just going to shorten this to allow us to move the center point of that servo, and that should let us that should give us enough play to have us full travel, because they don't really move much on these. That sort way forward, that sort way back. It's close to drive shaft, but I think I'd just be happy just shortening it a little bit, so it's going to be a millimetre or so up. So I'll get that shortened and let's see how we get on. Right, so that's just shortened this slightly, and now there's plenty of clearance with drive shaft and it's not hitting the chassis. If it goes all the way forward, we've got a few mil clearance all round, so I'm more than happy with that. So let's see what else we've got to do. Right, next thing to fit is the antenna wire holder. Not entirely sure if I'm going to be using this on this one, but possibly. It is only a really short antenna, and this one just comes up from the bottom. Then you just have to decide where you want the antenna to go into it, where you want the slot, and just nip it up, and that's that fitted. Right, so time to choose where ESC and receivers go in. So I think I'm going to go down that route, because then there's plenty of wire, plenty of room for the servo wire, and I think I may just be able to get the switch down the side of it as well without the drive shaft getting close to the ESC, and it's a nice run for the antenna. So let's get these stuck down and I'll get the cables soldered on. So basically this is what I've decided to run with. I'm going to be running off 2S LiPos, and all mine are pretty much the same length cable, so I've shortened the cable right down. We've brought the steering and everything up, soldered the motor wires on because my ESC and everything is on the 3M lock tape, and that you can just pop off whenever you like. So if I do need to take the motor out, I can just pop the ESC out with it. Receiver, I've gone with the one with antenna on for the same reason as I've not gone a brushless motor. It's a classic type of vehicle, so I've gone for what would sort of match it, which is nice high end but still brushed motor, and still got the antenna wire on. But this servo is crazy fast and it don't catch anywhere. I've got to set the end points, but other than that, I think we've got it running in forward and brake, no reverse. I may enable reverse on it because I don't think I'm going to be racing this one. But let's crack on and see what else we do. Alright, so we've got the wheels to put together, and it does say the direction they drive on for when you put them on the car, because they've got these little teardrop things. I'm not sure if they've reversed them. Yeah, it looks like they have. But basically, we've got no foams on these, so it's just the tyres to get in. And it does say you pop them in and then spin them. But I mean, I've built quite a few Tamiyas, and from what I can tell, it's just going to make your fingers hurt no matter which way you do them. And you just have to basically manhandle them until they go on. So, just a case of ragging them about until they sit down on the actual wheels. Now, entirely up to you whether you glue them or not. For me, I think I'd tend to glue them, but basically all I do is get the tyre into place, and then once I've got them all fitted, just make sure you've not got it squashed, because there's no holes in these anywhere. Might be tempted to put a couple of holes in outside, but that's one of the front ones on. And the back ones, with them being bigger, are usually a bit easier. But yeah, that's basically how I put them on. I just force them, and they seem to sit down pretty well. And then just work your way round. You've just got to make sure that they are properly sat in the lip in position, and then just let some air back into them. So I'll crack on with this and see what else we've got. Right, I decided against gluing the wheels on, simply because these are the stock wheels, and if I want to give it any serious running, I'm probably just going to find some of my old race tyres that are kicking about, that wheels and tyres that fit, and chuck them on it. So they're not going to get any seriously stressful driving put through them. But let's just pop the wheels on so you get an idea of the size and the footprint of this car. I'm surprised how high they sit compared to modern 110s. Definitely one of the first things that struck me, the amount of ground clearance it's got. You'd have no issues running this on a bit of a field. Definitely be able to run it round off road. I mean, I can fit my entire hand under it. I think I could pretty much fit one of the lipos under it quite easily. Yeah. So it can run over a lipo. There's definitely some serious ground clearance there, and it really has got a lot of suspension travel too. But that for a Tamiya car, that suspension is absolutely fantastic. But let's see what else we've got to finish this thing off. Right, so I think the last thing we've got to fit before we get round to all the bodywork is pop the battery in, then see if this will fit. I must admit, these Z-packs, they fit really well in the Tamiya or Tamiya cars. But there we go, fully built, and even with battery in. That suspension's impressive. There's very little play in the actual steering, which I'm quite impressed with, but no slop in the suspension at all. It's a really solid RC. Definitely some gorgeous parts in it. But that is the car about as far as I can get at the minute. The weather's awful, so I'm not going to get a chance to spray the bodywork just yet, and the wing. But let's wrap this one up. Right, so as I say, this is as far as I can get without painting the body and the wing. It's been an absolute cracking build so far. I've really enjoyed it. As I say, years ago I'd have loved to have one of these, just could never afford one. Now I've got channel, I get to have the things that I really couldn't have when I was younger. But beautiful build, really easy and enjoyable. For Tamiya's part so far, the only thing that's been a bit weird is these said it were locking nuts and you actually get a washer and a nut. And I believe the underside of this, I had a small washer missing from the kit. But I have got a metal washer that didn't fit. And just looking in the body clip bag, I think that's the washer that we're missing. Not sure what it were doing in there and not with rest at parts. But so far we've got a bunch of bits left. I think the wing buttons I'm recognising. Couple of screws. We've got a few of these little E-clips. Not sure if they're spare. We've got some tiny screws and washers. I'm guessing they're again for maybe it's side at spoiler. We've got a spare little grub screw and a bunch of other random screws and a bunch of bearings left. So yeah, a few bits left. You know what I'm like with RCs, and if there is any weird little mod bits and that, I will do my best to get my hands on them, because I like to have all the little bling bits on them. But it's been a cracking build. I've really enjoyed it. Really glad I went for this RC, and really big thanks to Dave and crew at RD Models, and they helped me get out of this one. So thanks a lot, Dave. Also, I've had quite a lot of other stuff from there. I believe the ESC and the motor is also from RD Models. So this one is kind of an RD Models build. But one more thing before I go. I've been asked why I zoom out at the end of videos. And I'm surprised nobody's noticed yet why I do it. But it's actually because I hide things that I'm working on in the background. So if you watch all the way to end and you see the zoom out, you're probably going to spot stuff that I've got coming up on channel. But thanks again for watching WTF Rc Cars. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to follow on with this build or anything else. And catch you guys again in the next one.